Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another wonderful, fun-filled episode of Watch Me Wrench. As you can see, I got the rear bead locks and the tires mounted. I went to a shop and I got them balanced. I was worried that maybe they wouldn't balance out. And the reason why is because you got to get the tire centered on the rim. Because let's say the tire is not centered on the rim, the tire is going to wobble. But I got them centered. Plus, if the torque wasn't equal, let's say, this side of the outer ring stuck out more, that would also throw off the balance, but everything worked out perfect, no issues. So now we are on to the fronts. So I got the tires mounted. Got these wheels balanced as well, and I have the TPMS sensors on the inside of the front wheels, and I also have them mounted mounted on the bead locks. Honestly, I'm not going to say just yet how I got the sensor in there or what I did or how I made it work. I might keep that one a secret to myself, so we'll address that in a little while. Plus, I have to get the car. I got to get the car. Basically, the tire light came on because you have new sensors, and you have to reset the car so that it learns these sensors. So you got to stop at the dealer because you need a special tool for that. Some type of scan device. They hold it up to the rim, and it picks up the sensor. So we have to work on. Now we have to work on getting the front tires and rims mounted on the car, but of course, this being a Corvette, nothing's that easy. We have to change the wheel studs, and I've never done that before, so I'll have to make a video on how to do the wheel studs. Oh, and one more thing. Now that these are off the car, they're really big, and I weighed these on a scale, and these turned out to be 68.5 pounds. These weighed 56 pounds even. So we're saving 12.5 pounds on each side of the car. It's a total of 25 pounds less of weight that the motor has to spin. So that should equal, a little more power to the rear wheels as well. The front rims weighed 6 pounds, but with the tires mounted on them, it now weighs 26 pounds. And I'll take these off and I'll weigh these and we'll see the difference. So that's where we are. Oh yeah. I've never really been able to appreciate how fast the car is, even when I just did the supercharger with the headers and the bigger injectors and the tune. When the car made 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, I still wasn't able to appreciate how fast the car was because it basically just always spun the tires. And after the car made 670 horsepower to the rear wheels, you couldn't really appreciate it. But now with these sticky tires on there, the car grabs and hooks, and I'm thoroughly impressed by how powerful and fast the car is. I mean, what impressed me the most was the front end just lifting so high, because the car always just spun the rear and it would just fishtail a little, so it wasn't really getting traction. But now that it has traction, the front of the car is just coming up so high. It's pretty impressive. So I took it out for one spin late the other night. It was pitch black, so I didn't take any video. But yeah, these tires worked really well. And they currently have 30 psi in there. But if I lowered it even more, it'd probably do even better. Alright, so let me get to work and I'll be back. Okay, welcome back. So I got the front tire off. I got the front end of the car supported with these two jack stands and a piece of wood. I lower the lift. When the jack stands make contact with the undercarriage, as the lift goes down, it lifts the front of the car up. So I got the wheel off. Now I'm going to take the caliper off. Once the caliper's off, then the front rotor will come off. And you don't have to disconnect the brake line going to the caliper. You can hang the caliper from here with a coat hanger or a wire, or you can maybe, I'm hoping maybe I can rest it here, put a rag down so I don't scratch this, the powder coat. And then I'm hoping maybe I don't have to take the wheel bearing off, and then I could press these out with the wheel bearing on the car. Otherwise, I think there's 4 bolts on the back that I would have to undo to take out the wheel bearing. But let's see. The jury's still out on this one. I saw a video, one guy says he left the wheel bearing on and he was able to press them off with the wheel bearing on, but his video skipped that part. So let's see how to do it on a C6 Corvette. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, I'm using a 13/16 nut on these 2 back bolts. Jeez, you can't see anything. These are the 2 bolts on the back of the caliper. There's 1, and there's 2. Now, I've got a 21mm socket here. I put it on there, but it had a lot of play. So the 13/16 socket fit perfect, nice and tight. So I'm using a 13/16 socket to remove this. I'll be back. Okay, so I got the caliper off. I got the rotor off. It was a little stuck on there, so I just took the rubber mallet and hit it like 2-3 times on the bottom gently and came off. So here's the new ARP studs. These are from here, from the inside of this lip to here to the outer edge. It's like 3¼ inches. These stock ones are, I don't even know how long. Let's just say about 2 inches long from the outer edge to the inside here. So it looks like if you were just trying to replace a factory stud, you could probably do it on the car. Because if you look here, this is coming in, right here, you have enough room where you could probably press it out. But if you take this longer one, I don't think you'd be able to thread it through that hole, because look at the angle. See what's happening? I don't think you'd be able to get it through. Hold on. I don't know. I don't think so. So I think I'm just going to take the wheel bearing off this whole assembly. It's 3 bolts on the back, and they're torque bits. So, and you gotta just unplug this one sensor here. So let me get to that, and I'll let you guys know how it goes. I'll be back. Okay, so in typical Corvette fashion, we ran into a snag. So you can't just unbolt the 3 bolts on the back. This one over there, and one down here. Because look, this is in the way. And you can't get the Torx bit in here to access that bolt. Now see, shit like this is intentional. And GM and auto manufacturers intentionally do shit like this on purpose, so that, you know, to discourage one from working on their own car. Seriously, you had to put that right there. You couldn't move it up over here. So, looks like I might have to undo this and drop the lower A-arm, try to disconnect it from the knuckle. I'm trying to do this in a few steps, and as long as I get this stud out of the way, then I should be able to take out the 3 nuts, pull the wheel bearing assembly out. So that's where I am. So, if I drop this lower A-arm with the shock in place, you know, this is probably going to drop down to here. I might have to put the jack underneath it to lift it back up. So let me try doing that, and I'll be back. So it's like 3 hours later since my last clip. It's now dark. What night? Okay, so what I'm seeing out there is A lot of people are disconnecting the upper A-arm, the lower A-arm, and the steering tie rod end link. And I always try to do things in as little steps as possible. But from what I'm doing today, it's not necessary to disconnect it here and here. I just needed to disconnect the lower A-arm just enough so you see I could get the torque bit in there, which now I can. So if you're doing what I'm doing, putting longer, 3 1/4 inch ARP studs, this is probably the best way and easiest way to do it. Now, what took so long? This would not separate for anything. I tried everything, ran to the auto parts store, bought some tools, hoping something would be able to I got some tie rod end presses, but this is too fat for the claws to go around because the claws would hook under here and then the rod would push down, but the 2 tools I bought weren't wide enough. So you don't really want to beat on this. I was hitting this so much it wasn't coming loose. You don't want to hit here. I was putting wood, hitting the nut with wood, a dead blow hammer. But what I wound up having to do is using this air impact chisel with this bit, but it did no damage because this bit falls right into the stud. You could see that's all it did. It just made a mark on the inside. So I just whacked it a couple times, went brrr, and it dropped and came loose. But I was trying everything else, but nothing would work. So now hopefully I can undo those 3 bolts. Hopefully they're not frozen. And then I can pull this wheel bearing assembly off and then press these out. So we'll see how it goes. And this was, this nut is, 21 millimeter? Yeah, 21 millimeter. But honestly, the 13th, 16th, for some reason, it fits better. It's grabbing better, but the 21 had a little more play in it. So I'm going to use the T35 torque bit and get this off now. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so there it is. I got the wheel bearing assembly out. Now I can put these in my press and press these out. Hopefully it'll work on my little cheapo press. So if you want to remove the wheel bearing assembly and replace this is pretty much how you could do it. Save yourself 2 extra steps. You don't have to disconnect the steering arm here, and you don't have to disconnect the upper A arm. You just need to drop this a little so that you could get the torque bit back there. So that, and drop, when you drop the A arm, you'll drop this stud will go down with the A arm, and then you could get the torque bit in there. And so that the shock, this is important. You don't want your shock bottoming out, and you don't want your shock holding up your suspension. So I just put a couple of blocks of wood, and I have the lift off the ground like an inch. And when the blocks of wood just started to make contact and push up a little bit on this, I stopped right there so that the shock is not bottoming out and the shock isn't holding the suspension up. So you're going to want to relieve the stress from the shock. If you could just put a jack here or something. But that's how I did it. Alright, so now I'm going to try to press these out and get these in. Like I said, if you were just replacing these stock ones, you might be able to press these out with the wheel bearing still in the car. But these are really long, much longer. So it wasn't going to work because they were going to go in on an angle like this, and it wouldn't have cleared. Alright, so let me get to the bench, the press, and I'll be back. Okay, so there's basically no way for me to press out the studs. There's just not enough room with this cheapo press. So I figured out a way how to do it. Let me show you. Okay, so I've got it in a vise. Now I'm going to work on this stud here. So what I did was, this is a 6-inch C-clamp. I took a socket and I taped it to one end. I take another socket and I put it over here. Because if you just try to tighten down on this part, on the tip of the stud, it just keeps falling off. So just to give this base something to hold on to. And then with this socket, the socket goes over here. And then as you push this way, the stud could fall into the socket. Let me try to show you how I have this set up. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You see the C-clamp here. Here's the socket. It's over the base of the stud. I got another socket on the end of the stud. And then I will crank down on this and it'll pop out. Let me see if I could try to film this. Hold on. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Hold on. Take this for some extra leverage. It is tough, so if you have like an 8-inch with a bigger handle, it'll probably be easier. So let's see if I could do this with one hand. Oh, this one's not budging. Well, it should come off any second. There you go. So, if you don't have a press, that's how you could do it. Get a C-clamp and 2 sockets and some blue tape. Alright, let me finish this up and I'll be back. Okay, so welcome back. It's the next day. Ran into a lot of snags. If anyone thinks this job is easy, I mean, take a look. I think I have like 3/4 of my toolbox just dumped here. 4 different length torque wrenches, I mean, wood, paper, tape. I mean, this is a project and a half. I mean, shit everywhere. This piece of junk is too small. I was literally only able to get 1 stud pressed in, but then you couldn't get any others because you're not able to turn it. And I don't like, you know, taking washers, a spacer, and a nut and cranking stuff on. That was the only choice. That was the only way I could get them on. I went to a local shop and they wouldn't press them on for me. That's your typical jerk you find here on Long Island, New York. And then I had to go find a lug nut that was the same size as the thread, and that was an ordeal. This is, what is it? 1/2 inch by 20 by 13/16. Not a common size. So I got 1 more wheel to go. I'll show a little more in depth how to do it. Everything is torqued up. So that's what it looks like. I didn't show you guys these lug nuts yet. I don't believe so. So this is what I got. $130 just for 10. They're aluminum, really lightweight. But you need a different kind of lug nut for this setup. So they match the wheels. Whoop-de-doo. Alright, now I just gotta do the other side. Now I haven't said anything to you guys yet, but I might as well try now. Today is Saturday, what is it, like the 16th? of September. And I usually don't give dates because sometimes my videos take 1 or 2 or 3 months for me to post. So tomorrow, the 17th of September, is a slipstream roll racing event at Pocono Raceway. So it's 150 miles from here. So I'm trying to get the car done. Got to test it tonight, make sure there's no vibrations, make sure everything feels right. And I'm hoping to get there tomorrow. But I have 2 obstacles. Number 1, it looks like it's going to rain. Number 2, I spent a couple hours yesterday trying to get a trailer for this. And there are some trailers available, but the problem is like the trailers that you can rent at U-Haul, they're only 75 inches wide. And I need 77, well, I need like 78, 79 inches wide. Because from the outer edge of this tire to the outer edge of the other tire is 77 inches. And the other trailers I found were the same setup. It was 75 inches wide and I need 77. Alright, so I'm trying to do that for you guys. Hopefully we can go roll racing tomorrow. If I can finish and if I can find the trailer and if it doesn't rain. So all three of those things need to cooperate. The weather, a trailer, and if I can finish. Alright, let me get to the other side, I'll be back. Okay, so I showed you yesterday how you could press out the studs with a C-clamp. You could also do it in a vise. Put a socket on this end. Have this end of the stud up against one other end of the vise. Crank on it. And then the stud will fall into the socket. So now I showed you 2 ways to press these out. Alright, let me get to it and I'll be back. Alright, let me just show you how I'm getting these studs pressed on. Taking a socket, I put the socket over. Take a couple of washers, I take a lug nut. And then I use my air gun and I tighten it up until it pulls it in flush. Put plenty of oil on the threads just underneath this head and put some oil on the holes here. It actually helps to slide them in easier rather than doing them dry. So just put a socket over and crank them down. This is not the ideal way to do it. You'd like to press them on, but I don't have a press to do it and nobody's willing to help me out, so I figured out a way how to do it myself, just like most of you guys would do it. Alright, so let me get this on the car and I'll be... Okay, so here's the wheel hub, the wheel bearing assembly. All the studs are pressed in. I just wiped everything down, cleaned all the surfaces. If you notice, GM put some type of Loctite on here, so what I do is I'll put this in the vise, grab the head here, take a wire wheel brush, and I will knock off all of this, clean the threads, and then I will put some red Loctite on all of these, the 3 bolts that hold the wheel bearing assembly in place. And also the 2 large bolts that hold the brake caliper in place has some type of Loctite on there. So I'll clean them and put some red Loctite in there too. I'm not going to share my torque specs because this is a 2012 Corvette Grand Sport and perhaps it's different on your car if you have like a 2008 base Corvette or a 2009 01. So I'm not going to share the torque specs. So we're going to put this plate up here. This is the orientation it was from the factory. And then I will put the wheel hub assembly back in. And I made a little mark so I know which way this was positioned originally, so I could put it back in the same position. And then I will torque these bolts. I believe I said before that the torque bit was T53, but it's T55. Yeah, T55 torque bit to tighten the 3 bolts that hold the wheel bearing assembly in. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so the wheel bearing assembly is in, it's torqued. I got the plate in place. I got the wires plugged back in. So now I'm going to tighten the lower control arm bolt. Remember, like I mentioned earlier, you want to support this. You don't want all of the weight of tension bottoming out these shocks. So you want to support the upper A-arm, the lower A-arm, and a couple of blocks or a jack. Alright, let me get that bolt on. It's this one right here. I'll torque it up, and then I'll work on the caliper. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I got this torqued down properly. Now I'm going to put the 2 bolts that hold the brake caliper in. First I got to slide the rotor on, then I can put the brake caliper over the rotor, tighten it with the 2 bolts. I got some red Loctite on there, and then we should be done. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, I got the rotor slid on over place. Here's a tip. I take there's a brass brush, and I knock off any rust, because you want to have a perfectly flat mating surface for the wheel and for the spacer. So always do this. This is good to get into the habit of this and clean the surface. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, I got the 2 nuts. 1, 2. I got them torqued in. That's it. We're done. This hell job is over. Wow, was this a real tough job. Real tough job. Now let me just get the wheel on and torque them to what Weld recommends, and that's it. Alright, I'll be back. There she is, ladies and gentlemen, all done. I'm exhausted. This is a really tough job to do. Really tough. Oh shit. I forgot to weigh the front. Oh, I could just have to weigh these. I know these weigh 26 pounds. So let me just weigh those, and then I can tell you the difference. See how much we saved on the front. Looks pretty good. Looks racy. I like the tread pattern, how it looks. No, I'm not going to be selling these, and no, I'm not giving them away. These are going in the storage in my shed with, along with the original wheels and tires I have for this, which only have 400 miles on them. I got the wheels are basically the same color as the car, the factory ones I got. Boy, that front looks really good. I'm really impressed. Well, let's drive it and make sure there's no shakes, no wobbles, and it tracks true and straight. Alright, I'll be back.